Now in today's forum, we will have, it's very simple. We're going to have a couple award presentations, and then we're really going to dive into our panel and have a discussion. And our panel is including people with IDD and faith communities, perspectives from diverse faith traditions. Now, throughout today, I would like to encourage participation. So I know if you attended the AAIDD conference, you were able to chat throughout every presentation. Let's continue that. I think it's more interactive when we're able to ask questions, to include other comments, other perspectives, to really enrich the conversation. Now, you might also be able to use reactions. So on the bottom of your screen, if you hover over the bottom, you'll see reactions. And so you can interact that way as well. You can put the clapping hands or a heart or the surprise face, whatever you want, just to keep us going and keep us interactive as well. This is 2 hours, so you know yourself best. Make sure you're comfortable. Make sure if you need to get more water, coffee, that you do so. And so we want you to enjoy this session, to really just relax and take in the information and think about all the different perspectives. Now, I'd like to tell you a little more about the Religion and Spirituality Interest Network. We are an interfaith, interdisciplinary association that advocates for the inclusion of people with disabilities in faith communities of their choice. So our mission is to share resources that foster opportunities for spiritual growth for people with disabilities while respecting their religious identity. I'd like to let you know we have a steering committee who we meet once a month, except in the summer we have a couple months off. If you're on the steering committee, could you please wave? You'll see. You see a bunch of us on here today. It is a fun group just to get together, talk about different ideas, and we've gotten a lot done this year. I'll let you know some of our accomplishments for this year, and think about these things. What things are interesting to you as well? We have a new logo, and that's something you can look on our website. We have updated our website with the logo and the branding, updated pages on it. If that's something you're interested in, we could always use help with that. It could be a one-time thing, once in every while. We had a 4-part webinar series about Black lives with IDD and their faith communities. You can find that on our website. You can see the videos for that and get that information as well. We, of course, had review the awards, and we will see those. We will have those 2 presented today. And of course, we have our forum, annual meeting activities, and we also have our engagement survey that is out right now. And actually, when we're done talking, I'll put a link to that in the chat box. And so you can have an opportunity, if you're in the interest network, if you've ever been in, or you just want to provide feedback about what you would like to see, that will be available to you as well. I would like to thank all of the people in our steering committee. Now, they have waved, but I do want to point them out because they've worked pretty hard throughout this whole year. There's David Morstead, right there. Debbie Fisher, Shelly Christensen, Keith Dow, Bill Gaventa, Ann Masters. And then we have also had Megan Orsog and Neil Cudney, participate as well. So we have done a lot of exciting things. And I am Sarah Hall. I'm also on the committee. I almost forgot that. I am the current president. And so if you have interest in doing any of these activities, look on our website, see what we do. If you just want to come to a meeting and listen in, please let me know and I will invite you. All right, so I would like now to go to our award presentations. And we're first going to hand it off to Debbie Fisher. Debbie?
Thank you. It is really a pleasure and an honor to introduce you to this year's AAIDD Religion and Spirituality Interest Network Student and Early Career Award to Sehrish Shikarpurya for the important contribution she is making to the field in the paper she presented yesterday at the conference. If anybody was there, it speaks for itself. I don't really have to emphasize how critical the information is that she the work she's doing and information she's collecting. The title of her research paper was Expectations versus Reality, Intersection of Faith and Disability for Muslim Families of Young Adults with IDD. And a brief summary points out that research posits that Muslim parents of children with disabilities rely heavily on their faith and the mosque to make meaning of their lived experience. And what she found was that for Muslim families, mosques function as centers of social, religious, and community well-being. They explored the experiences of Muslim families with informal and formal supports provided by their mosques and recommended strategies to strengthen faith-based supports for diverse families. I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody who's participating in this forum how important the voice of the Muslim community is in our ongoing conversation about bringing the folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities into their diverse faith and spiritual communities of practice. And so we're just delighted to have the opportunity to include this important work, both from the perspective of the family, the people with IDD who are Muslim, but also because we have so many DSPs, direct support professionals, who are Muslim, and creating a place for them in this conversation is one of the important goals we continue to try to accomplish here in our network. A little bit about Sehrish. She is a doctoral student at Texas A&M University. Her research focus are really three areas: increasing minoritized family involvement in transition planning, supporting transition processes, services, and post-secondary outcomes for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities from minoritized backgrounds, and understanding intersectionality of faith and disability among young adults with IDD and their families. She has served as a special educator in a faith-based setting in Texas and in Georgia for 3 years. Please join me in celebrating and welcoming and congratulating Sehrish for the terrific work she's doing and the contribution she's making to the field. And you might want to also hit your reaction button. Thank you, Sehrish.
So now we'll turn it over to David for the presentation of the Religion Spirituality Leadership Award.
Thanks, Sarah. One of the joys you have at being a past president of the Religion and Spirituality Interest Network is that you are immediately promoted to chair of the award committee. And this is always the best job in the world, and especially so this year. It is just such an honor for me to be able to introduce this year's award recipient, Shelly Christensen. Just a word about the award itself. For years, you may have known this award as the Henry J. M. Nouwen Award. Earlier this year, the network leadership that you just heard about began the process of reframing and eventually renaming of the award, all in order to bring it into a broader context and a more contemporary understanding of the spiritual expression of all people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Shelly's personal and professional influence at this intersection of faith and disability has been nothing short of profound. Shelly is an author, a speaker, she is a teacher, and she is a mentor. She was co-founder of the Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month, and her outreach work through Inclusion Innovations has invited all of us, regardless of our particular religious identity or tradition, into a deeper and richer understanding of what it means to be a community of faith. In her most recent book, and if I was better prepared, I'd show you a copy. From longing, from longing to belonging, Shelly offers some great stories and some great strategies, but I think most important of all, a great challenge to every faith community that they might truly become, as she is fond of quoting, a house of prayer for all people. With that, I will simply say congratulations, Mazel Tov, to our 2021 recipient of the Religion and Spirituality Leadership Award, Shelly Christensen. Shelly?
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. And Sehrish, congratulations to you on this award. And I loved your presentation yesterday, and I just want to learn more about your work. In the olden days, of course, when we were all in place in a building at a conference, I could look at each of my friends and colleagues who've been part of this journey. But today we're in that virtual conference room called Zoom, which means that other people are here too. My cousin Corey, my auntie Lane, just because they family is, and my husband Rick, of course. But I want to point out my friends in the Religion and Spirituality Interest Network: Bill Gaventa, Ann Masters, Debbie Fisher, Dave Morstead, Keith Dow, and Sarah Hall. You've all been my teachers and my guides, and you've let me be your teacher and guide too. No one does this work alone. My family makes my heart full. My amazing husband, Rick, who during our almost 42 years of marriage has supported and encouraged me when I left the beaten career path to pursue this work. Our sons and daughter-in-law, Aaron and Nancy, Jacob and Zach, and the 4 little people who allowed me membership in the club to which I've already paid my dues. Our grandchildren, Eli, Isaac, Anna, and Eve. I am so proud of my family. When Sarah Hall called me this spring to tell me that I was the recipient of this award, I was speechless, which, as those of you who know me, is as rare as a snowstorm in mid-July in Minnesota. I am so proud to stand on the shoulders of past recipients to be honored for work that ultimately I was called to do. Sorry, my nose itches. Of course. Lida Merrill is on this webinar. She's a past recipient, and I also want to recognize all the past recipients of this award when it was known as the Henry Nouwen Award. 2 of them influenced me personally. Dr. Sarah Rubino Simon, who I love to call the godmother of Jewish education, inclusive education, and the late Barbara Newman, whose spirit, generosity, and wisdom will always be a part of this award. Rick and I have been blessed to raise 3 remarkable sons and to navigate the unplanned journey of having a child on the autism spectrum. I wouldn't be at this forum without the experiences that required my own growth and development in the role of a parent. I have a strong sense of social justice, fairness, and the basic human right to belong. So it wasn't a surprise when, appalled at how Jake was being treated by his public school teachers, I went to work to learn the laws. You know the laws, the IDEA, the ADA, all the alphabets, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. I became a fierce advocate looking for allies in his teachers and special educators and administrators. It was a battle just to prove to them that our son was capable of learning, excelling really without completing his homework assignments. I can't tell you how many times I received the Mrs. Christensen calls from school administrators and teachers. You can imagine that they weren't calling to tell me how well Jacob was doing. One of these Mrs. Christensen calls set the trajectory for my career when the assistant principal of Jake's junior high called to inform me that he was giving my son in-school suspension for poking a hole in a concrete wall with a pencil. I literally felt a shift from being the nice, agreeable mom to the fearless warrior. How do you propose my son receives his free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment and in-school suspension? I demanded. Well, Jake went to all his own classes that day, and I learned the art of patience and collaboration, which works much, much better in parent-school interactions than anger does. The only place we didn't have an issue was at our synagogue religious school. Jake was just part of his classroom of peers, not treated any differently, not special. And the school and the synagogue is where everybody was celebrated. All three of our sons had a quality religious education and were part of this vibrant synagogue community. And that was our goal for our kids. And it turns out it was Bet Shalom's goal too. My own story and the story of inclusion of people with IDD in Jewish life converged. I changed careers, earning a master's degree in developmental disabilities, and then the universe and Jewish Family and Children's Service of Minneapolis provided the opportunity to start a new program working with synagogues, schools, and agencies to develop ways to move people with IDD from invisibility to visibly in, as we used to say, so they too could be part of Jewish life. Every part of me felt called to this new work. I was grateful that I had embraced patience as a parent because I needed to be still and patient as I listened to resistance from synagogues and agencies. We can't afford it. We can't let those kids disrupt the education of the others. Sure, we'd like to be inclusive, but it's just not on our agenda. And my all-time favorite, resistance. We don't have people with disabilities here. Open your eyes, I wanted to shout. You may not see them in the pews and in your school, but people with disabilities and mental health conditions are part of the community. They are the invisible ones. They are the ones that, in your ultimate wisdom, have been barred from belonging. I didn't shout. Instead, I met with each organization where they were at. You can't shove change down people's throats if you want them to become allies, I learned. The faith community disability inclusion movement has been growing for some time in the academic world, in education, in provider agencies and congregations, in home and community-based services. The impetus, though, comes from people with disabilities and mental health conditions and those who love them. People don't want faith communities doing them a favor by letting them attend a service, a special religious school class, or life cycle preparations. People want to be accepted and respected and supported to live the spiritual, religious, and communal life they need and choose. The great Kabbalist, Rabbi Isaac Luria, in the 16th century, taught that everything God created has a spark of divine energy that constitutes its essence and soul. When people utilize something toward a godly end, they bring to light this divine spark, manifesting and realizing the purpose for which it was created. Can we, if you're not muted, would you please mute? Thank you. Thank you. Rabbi Luria taught that before creation, God's essence and light needed to be harnessed or contracted to make space for creation to begin. This is called tzimtzum, contraction in Hebrew. After contraction, God created vessels in this empty space and poured God's light into them. But the vessels were not strong enough to hold the power of God's light, and they shattered, and they were dispersed across the space. Tikkun is the process of gathering the sparks of God's light together, bringing the shards of broken vessels back to wholeness. This is perhaps our purpose. Tikkun olam, in Hebrew meaning to repair the world. by doing all we can to bring the shards of light back together to a place of purpose, of meaning, of fulfillment, of contribution, a place where each of us matters. Each person who sits on the margins of a faith community and religious or spiritual participation represents a shard of light waiting to be reunited with the vessel from which they emerged. How long do people have to wait? The clock is ticking in their lives. Why do people with disabilities need an invitation? I contemplated this question for many years. What would move faith communities to understand that people living with a disability or a mental health condition just wanted to belong like anyone else? I adapted my entire approach with faith communities. It woke people up. They identified with wanting to belong. They realized people with disabilities weren't someone's mitzvah project or charity project. Rather, they were people who were called to perform mitzvot, to contribute, participate, be valued, and be known, and to belong like anyone else. I wrote my book, From Longing to Belonging, to help people understand that having a sense of belonging is the foundation to being an inclusive, diverse, and equitable community. The structure, practices, and policies of inclusion are still very much a part of this work. It's the how, but belonging, that's the why. The why of inclusion is unique to each of us. The why of inclusion is belonging. In Jewish liturgy, we recite a prayer thanking God for bringing us to this moment in time. I'd like to offer the Shehechianu prayer in appreciation for all of us coming together and bringing our light to this forum, to each other, and to our world. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed is God, creator and ruler of the universe, who brings us to this moment, empowering us to make our world whole. And in being God's partner, the potential, possibilities, and purpose of each of God's creations will be revealed, accepted, and nurtured. Amen. And thank you so much for this incredible honor.
Congratulations, Shelly. Wonderful. Well, we are so honored to have you as a part of our group with all the work you've done and you continue to do. So thank you so much. Well, now we will begin with our panel. And as I said, this is including people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in faith communities, perspectives from diverse faith traditions. And so I will hand it back over to Shelly as we'll have the panel introduce themselves and then they will speak and we'll have a discussion afterwards. So please, throughout the panel, please write questions, write comments. We will be looking at that. And so the discussion at the end, we will include some of your questions. Shelly?
Thank you, Sarah. I am just so excited for all of you to hear our wonderful panelists today. And inclusion and belonging are all woven into every aspect of faith community life. And our panelists really exemplify living inclusion, living belonging. So I'm going to introduce them. And I also, one of our speakers, Dr. Lamar Hardwick, was unable to join us today. And he recently had surgery and he is, thank God, recovering really well. And so we're happy to report that, but he's unable to join us today. So we all offer Lamar our prayers for healing. We are fortunate to have with us an amazing panel who will share their stories and talk about what they want people to know about their faith, perceptions, misconceptions, challenges, strategies, and resources. And our panelists for today are Imam Nadim Bashir, Rabbi Rebecca Dubois, Esther Garcia, Sehrish Shikarpurya, and I'll be joining the panel too talk a little bit about sort of the global things that are happening in Jewish communities. So, what we're going to do, how this will work, is that each panelist will introduce themselves and talk about their work and share with them what they feel is important for all of us to understand. And to that note, I am going to turn it over, but again, if you are not muted, we're getting some feedback, some noise. And maybe we could just go ahead and mute everybody, and then whoever's speaking can unmute. Oh, there we go. Thank you. We much appreciated. Without further ado, Nadim, it's all yours.
So just to be clear, is this the 10 to 15 second introduction, or is this the elaborated discussion or introduction?
Oh, it's the 10 to 15 seconds, and you can actually have 30.
Okay. Thank you so much for your generosity. My name is Nadim Bashir. I am an imam in Plano, Texas. I'm also a co-founder of an organization known as DREAM, which stands for Disability Resources, Education, and Awareness for Muslims.
Thank you. Rabbi Dubo.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rabbi Rebecca Dubo, and I'm located in Bloomington, Illinois, which is about 2 hours south of Chicago. And I have a small, vibrant Jewish congregation. And I am a part of this panel because I've been, since birth, I was born deaf. And I'm the first female rabbi to be ordained in the world. Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Esther.
My name is Esther Garcia. I work with the National Catholic Partnership on Disability. My office is in Washington, D.C., but I'm so happy to work from Dallas, Texas. And I'm a parent with a child with autism and a mother, my mom with dementia, and I embrace this ministry with love.
Thank you, Esther. Sehrish.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sehrish. Along being a doctoral student, I also work with, I'm a Shia Muslim, so I work with Muslim families within my congregation. I work with about 100 in supporting them within our mosque. And I also used to teach in a Muslim setting with special education. We didn't say as special education, but it was individuals with disabilities.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I'm Shelly Christensen, and I have to just put my line out there. Everybody who knows this is coming. Christensen is the way I spell her last name, is the Jewish spelling. Bump. And I live near Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've been members of our congregation, Bet Shalom, for 38 years. And I have found just complete engagement and belonging there. So really happy to see all of you. And so what we'll do is now, Nadim, we're going into the longer part. So if you'd like to start, and then Rebecca, Esther, and then Sehrish, and then I'll finish up that part of the presentation. Go ahead.
Okay. So as mentioned earlier, that I am located in North Texas, Plano, Texas, to be exact. My journey actually started when I found out it was approximately 9 years ago, in 2012, that my 2-year-old daughter was diagnosed with ASD. And it was a shock for me. It was a shock for my wife. We had absolutely no idea. It was like, it was like a deer staring in front of headlights. We were just totally in a state of bewilderment. We had no idea what to do. We had no idea, what does this mean? We had no idea what her future would be like. But to be honest, we're just taking one day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time. Having said that, as being an imam, a religious leader in the community, I began to start reaching out to others and I began to notice that there were some organizations in the United States trying to find a way to grow awareness, to grow inclusion, and to work with different mosques. However, one thing that I've done over the years is that, as being an imam of not just only a mosque, but the mosque where I serve at is perhaps one of the within the five largest mosques in America. It's a very vibrant mosque. And being in touch with many of the other religious clergy across the nation when it comes to mosques, I know that if there's something going on in a big mosque where you have a very great or a great amount of resources, then I know and I have a good understanding of what is going on and within the other smaller mosques around the nation. And the one thing that I learned is that the way, and without getting into a lot of the details about the functions of a mosque, I will just say this much, that perhaps 99% of all the mosques in America, and it does not matter which denomination it belongs to, whether the Sunni or the Shia denominations, all of our mosques are run by the immigrant community. They're operated by the immigrant community. And till today, I would say that the generation that was born and raised in America, they have not found their way into the leadership of those mosques yet. And that's the reality. So having said that, the immigrant community are not fully equipped and they're not fully aware of the dynamics of the special needs community. What do they need? What do they require? What can we do for them? And because it's not an Islamic matter, but rather it's more of a cultural matter, I would say, that many of the families, they feel shy, they feel embarrassed in one way, that when they take their child who has any type of disabilities, they feel like that this is a reflection of their parenting skills and how poorly they may be parents. And because there's such a competitive atmosphere within the South Asian community, that's why many parents who have children with any type of disabilities, they usually isolate themselves from the entire community. Now, one thing that I have learned is that I've been trying to grow this awareness that you don't have to be shy. This is not a reflection of your parenting skills. You haven't done nothing wrong. And not only that, but I've given multiple talks because there's a certain mindset that may span across many religions, and that is that if you do good, God will do good with you, and if you do bad, then God will do bad with you. And the perception is that, for many parents who have any children with any type of disabilities, is that, have I done something wrong? Am I a bad person? Have I done something wrong to someone else that God has given me a child like this? And I have to always remind them that that is not the case. And many of my talks have been along those lines. Hope, optimism, do not self-criticize, do not engage in self-criticism. And I then began to come around to this fact that while there are some organizations that really want to focus purely on working with the mosques, I realize, and after talking with many of other imams across the nation, and then I even went to some of the top-notch, I would say, Islamic scholars in America that are looked up to, they are revered. And after consulting with them, I asked them that I want to start something, but I don't know, should I do it in collaboration with a mosque or not? Because this is the situation in all the mosques around the nation. And I basically came to the conclusion that I want to start my own organization, and we're in the works of that, which is called Dream. And this is not in collaboration with any mosque in America. This is just purely an independent organization where we're focused on just trying to bring parents together. And right now, when we say disability resources, what we're trying to focus on right now is, as we're talking about transition resources, we're talking about afterlife resources, we're talking about once they grow up, what are the opportunities for them. And I'll finish on this, that recently this has hit home even more, because there was a member of my congregation who passed away, and we found out, and this gives you a really good idea about the situation in the Muslim community, and things are getting better slowly and gradually, that he passed away, and we found out only after he passed away that he has 2 teenage sons who have autism. And the mother was at the graveyard. Of course, one is to cope with the death of her own husband. She's coping with that, but then she's also, in a state of confusion, uncertainty, I would say, that exactly what will happen and who will help her take care of her 2 teenage sons. And since then, I've been working, and I've been trying to reach out to some of my local resources, perhaps in Irving and in Dallas, trying to find services that can really help this mother. And I've been in touch with this mother too, just trying to find a way to help her get through this difficult time. I'm in touch with her family. And so it's a serious need. And that's why I felt that instead of waiting for the tide to turn and things to turn around in the dynamics of any mosque in America, I felt the need that let me just go and start something externally and apart from the mosque. And since then, we have then began to create more programs, just doing activities together, bringing mothers together, bringing fathers together, let them vent, let them talk, let them share their experiences with each other. And so soon we actually have some activities, joint activities between the special needs families at certain places within Dallas. And then we've also started to put together some mothers get-togethers and fathers get-togethers. And we're also conducting some educational programs. So that's pretty much, I know I had to take a long time there, but just want to give you the full picture of what's going on.
Thank you, Nadim. I want to know more. It's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rabbi Dubois, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. Nadine, never apologize for talking too long, because it's so important for us to hear what's going on, because there's a lot we do not know. So I want to thank you. And so I'm not sure where to begin, but I think it's important to recognize that in my faith tradition, and I think it applies to pretty much all of us, is the concept called B'Tselem Elohim, that we are all created in God's image, and that each of us are unique. And it's so interesting, and speaking on behalf of the Jewish deaf and hard of hearing community, it's very important to recognize that the biggest challenge or obstacle throughout the generations has been lack of assets in regard to communication. However, I'm not going to talk about that today. I don't want you to tell me, oh, we can just put an ASL interpreter in the after worship service and everything will be done. No, that's not my area of what I would want to focus on. I think it's more important to recognize that generally in the deaf community, especially those that are identified as native ASL speakers, they do not think that their ears are broken. They have this vibrant culture and community and everything around them. But on the other hand, due to the lack of accessibility, many of my people of the Jewish faith that are deaf did not receive a Jewish education. But then you could say, wait a minute, I'm a rabbi. How did I get an education? It's very important. I think many of us in the special needs community, as I said from the beginning, each one of us is unique. We all have different gifts. The challenge is recognizing what gifts we've been given the gift I've been given was to be able to speak well after years of therapy, but you can't compare what I hear or don't hear with someone else. And I was raised in a very vibrant Jewish home, active, and with a lot of ritual and structure, so much to see with my eyes and of course with my tummy, because we have delicious food for every holiday, but there's a lot to experience hands-on. But what I also think it's important in terms of recognizing that ASL is a beautiful language. And within that community, there are many successful people. There are doctors, there are lawyers, there are accountants, there are teachers, you know. But then again, the connection with the Jewish community has always been a challenge. I do want to update you and not be discouraged, because it's been the blessing of the pandemic. As ironic as it is, there are a number of small Jewish deaf community throughout the country, and a light bulb went off and said, well, we got to do something virtual. Because me, as the only female deaf rabbi in the Reform movement, I can't be at 2 or 3 places at a time, but virtually I can. And there are probably only 3 other rabbis. And what I mean is because ASL is so important to communication, most people don't want to have an interpreter at their wedding. They want to have, one-on-one wedding, or to be canceled, or even at a funeral. They want someone to speak and sign their own language, which is always a challenge. So back to what's happening this past year, and there have been 4 active communities that have said, look, we got to do something together. So now we have a Shabbat service happening every month virtually. And I initiated the first Introduction to Judaism class online, taught in ASL only. And we just finished 21 weeks, and there's a demand that people want to learn more. But then again, you may ask, well, what can we do? And I thought about the experience of when a family with special needs comes into the synagogue. And me as being a rabbi or a clergy. I know Shelly had told, there are rabbis and clergy that are clueless and don't even know what to say. Or if they do, they're not very smart in what they say. And so there are times that I need to remind people, sometimes when they reach out to me, they say, what do we do? What do we do? We have a family with a deaf child. I'm like, do you know the family? Do you know their name? Have you met? Have you sat in the room? Have you had a conversation? Or that whole concept of a sense of belonging. How do you do that? You got to bring them in. And you got to sit down, and rather than being proactive, because we like to be the doers, we want to make sure, can we do this program? Can we set up the ramp? Can we do this and this and that? Whoa. Put that on the side and say, and just sit, tell me your story and let me listen to you. That idea of listening is so challenging for many of us because we are the doers. We're the fixers. We want people to feel that they can come in. I do strongly believe, and we had an earlier conversation, and we were talking about being on the panel. I can see how the individual, the professional that work with whomever you are, caseworkers or teachers, or talk about the non-religious members of the team that work with the family, I can see a great benefit of considering inviting the clergy person to become a part of the team. It may not be that person, it could be a member of that synagogue or religious institution to be a part of that conversation, because I know every time we go into an IEP, we're always learning something new. But then at the same time, you go to the mundane things about how to be an advocate. So I think in terms of clergy, there's so much more that we need to learn. And to be a part of a conversation, I think that will take us far. The other thing I want to emphasize again what Nadine talked about, that throughout my career as a rabbi, every family who had a child with special needs would come and knock on my door of my office. Rabbi, I have a child with special needs. My child going to have a bar mitzvah at the age of 13. And I said, you're asking me? I said, I'm a rabbi. I've come this far. How can you not see what I've done that your child can do as well? So you can hear me talking about different roles that I play. You know, the fact that I am a person with a disability, even though I don't consider myself as one with a disability, because I don't think my ears are broken. Yeah, sometimes my heart is broken, but I think we all can relate to that. So I recognize my responsibility. I also recognize the need to be a listener, to understand, and to be empathetic with families who have members with special needs. I'll leave it there because I want to give time for the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. I always learned so much. I mean, yeah, so much from you. And we're going to go to Esther now. Hi, Esther. You're up.
Thank you. For me, it's an opportunity to learn from other faiths because we are in this ministry together as a brothers in Christ. But I can be here without my son. You know, Eric was helping me open the doors to learn something new, to be more creative, to be a better catechist, to be a better teacher, and not just stay there. Is share with other families, especially because, you know, it's 1 in 5 children have persons with disabilities. 1 in 5 is a big number, and 1 in 6 persons from the Hispanic community, 1 in 6, they have a disability. So the Hispanic community, and you don't see them because they hide themselves. As a part of the Hispanic community, I know I had to go and find them. And because they believe they feel embarrassed to have a child with disability, they hide themselves. I lose that embarrassment long time ago. My son was diagnosed with autism and speech delay when he was 3 years old. So I had to find resources. I had to educate myself and also educate the community. Because when I went to the library and he started, you know, crying because the way for him to communicate is crying. When he didn't like the sounds or the smells, he crying. And so I had to explain it and to the people around me and say, my son has autism, so he is the way he communicates. But I learned you have to educate sometimes the community. And I learned so much from being a mother of a child with autism. He's my second one. He's the little one, but he's the tallest. He's 6 feet tall, and he's the tallest of the family. But he is. I embrace this ministry of disability with love and gratitude because not just my son, but also my mom had dementia. So this is a ministry that I had to learn, especially because there were no resources when they diagnosed my son in 2007. And also no resources, of course, in Spanish. And you had to learn and educate yourself. But they opened the opportunity for me to help other families. I know the struggles, and so I just share with other parents. And I believe we all have a role. You don't have to be a professional to help other parents and to be accompany them. It's just as a part of the assembly, part of the community. You just welcome, you just smile them when the child has a behavior. You just smile to say, it's okay. No, we're together in this. As a catechist, I know I had to provide resources for the parents to help them in their faith. I was formed in my faith by my mother. And I have the presence of God in my life. And I want to pass that to my child. I want for my son to live the faith, to pray the rosary, to have these novenas and all this beautiful of our culture. but I had to find a way to work with him, and also to work with as a catechist. And also had the opportunity to be a director of faith formation. So I found a way to train and form the catechists. Don't be afraid. You don't have to know too much, but you have to say yes to accompany these families and just to share your faith. It's just an accompaniment that we need as a parents. And those opportunities help me to be in the National Catholic Partnership on Disability when I have my love for catechesis and love for ministry on disabilities, and I can help other people, other diocese directors across the country. And we just create this network so you can help each other's other diocese, other directors, they can help each other's and provide resources, especially during the pandemic when everybody feels so isolated and alone. So we provide resources. We have the meetings with the 14 regions to ensure just to check in what they need, how we can be with you and help each other. And I think as a parents, we need resources, and we need to ensure we support each other and recognize that what we need is to listen each other's, and we don't need to have a new plan, a new program. We don't need nothing special. It's just to listen what you need as a parent, what you need for your child. I know that because I sit with the parents, and I want full inclusion. Okay, I want one-on-one. Okay, we open a new class with one person. For me, one person was important. And I think every family is unique, and you have to find the ways to serve them, because we just follow the model of Jesus Christ, and that's the model I always show to my catechists how to serve them, and always modeling for the catechists or for your volunteers, for your families, how to do it. Use music, do activities, be creative. And sometimes you as a ministry leader, you have to modeling for them what is the best. But it's always a pleasure to be active and give those persons with disabilities be an active role in the community. That's that mission. Thank you.
Esther, thank you. And to everybody, I'm in awe of how you've taken something that's just part of your life, part of who you are, and have brought it to the world for change, for good. Sehrish, you're up.
Okay, so I will start a little bit backwards in terms of how I got here and then what are we doing within our own community. And so my sister was actually diagnosed with autism when she was in middle school. Prior to that, my parents felt like, she was repeating a grade or two. Everybody couldn't figure out what was happening. There were some social skills that she needed to be taught. And so they figured out that it was autism, but they were unable to support her because they had no idea what this realm entailed, I'm sure, like many other parents. And so even I was talking to my mom about it, and, she was saying how even within the Muslim community, she wasn't, even now, most of our family doesn't know. And so she was sharing how difficult it was for her to navigate these things, because she was saying how, she saw individuals in wheelchairs in the mosque, and they would be like sitting towards the back. And so during the prayer time, they wouldn't be in the middle of the congregation when everybody else was sitting. They would be towards the back. And that was, they claimed for accessibility reasons. I beg to differ, but, so a lot of times the idea would be like, oh, these individuals are too loud and they distract other individuals. And so, so they were always pushed towards the back. And my mom saw that vision. And so she wasn't comfortable sharing that her child also has a disability with other individuals, because she felt like that was going to be my sister's outcome if she shared that with anybody else. And also she didn't know that other individuals in the mosque also had multiple disabilities, because that was something we never talked about. So that internal parental network never really got built or strengthened, because like Nadim said, it was either based on fear or judgment or some sort of feeling like there was something lacking in you or your family. And so, you don't want to share that because it was uncomfortable to tell somebody that. And also, I feel like my mom herself hadn't even been able to process it herself. So how could she communicate the disability to others if she wasn't sure of it on her own? But one thing that my mom really appreciated was that my sister always wanted to come to the mosque. And to the mosque to the extent that she would always be there. And one thing that she would do is recite her prayers loudly. So we are sort of an internal community. We, do a lot of our prayers internally, but she would say them out loud. And some people would come to her and be like, hey, can you calm down? Like, why don't you say it in your heart? And she would just look at them and say, no, this is how I'm going to pray. Because she didn't know that you're supposed to say no to people like that. You're supposed to just listen to them and move on. So she was like, no. And we have rosary beads. And so she would just use them really loudly. And so I told my mom that, it's okay as long as she's in there. And so I asked my sister, do you know about Allah? Do you know about the prophets? Do you know about how we got to where we are as a community? And she would just look up and say no. But she knew all the verses of the prayers. She was there every single day at a certain time. And that's sort of when I realized her connection with her faith was strong with a very different level. I expected her to know the history. I expected her to know. I was like, how can you believe in something if you don't know about it to a certain degree? And she was like, this is all I am and this is all I know. And these are the people that I connect with the most. And that's sort of when I realized how different her faith looked and how important it was to evaluate and understand where she was coming from. And so that's when I started digging deeper a little bit into my community. And so I went to, a lot, and I've been doing this for over the past 3 years. And I've just been talking to parents and asking them, how does your child participate in the mosque? And they say the exact same things in terms of the child is very open to praying. The child loves coming to the mosque. The child loves to say hi to everybody. No, my child may not necessarily know the ins and outs of the religious figures or some of the rituals that we do, but they're there all the time. They connect with everybody. And to them, there's just some sort of a special power that is within the mosque space. However, once I dug a little bit deeper, I realized that, if we as a mosque are able to provide a little bit of support to these individuals, they would just fly, because they're so committed and they're there. But we haven't been able to do that, especially within our mosque. So what we've been doing is providing like verse. So, one of the things I realized is that they were so connected to the mosque space. They would come all the time and they would have these friends. However, when COVID hit, our mosques were closed like other religious spaces. And so we started connecting virtually. And so we would have these hour-long virtual classes. And so we would, have dance parties. We invited like a DJ one night. We would learn how to cook in these virtual classes. We had like parents hover over and be like, hey, what are you doing tonight? And so we had like an informal parent group forming where they would just be like, hey, are you cooking this? Are you doing that? Oh, my child doesn't eat this. And so we realized parents were talking to each other virtually. And prior to this, there was a sense of a taboo or an embarrassment for the parents to come out and speak, because instead of it being a space where, hey, I have, the same experiences, let's share, it became like, I don't want to talk about my experience because it's something very internal. But through this, we were able to externally connect and share resources and also, be able to see other individuals that look like us, that share similar experiences, that have similar values, that have similar languages. And it's interesting because they were in the same mosque for 20 years, yet they had no idea that there was another kid that was also 10 years old that looked like me and had the same experience. So we thought that was really interesting. And that's something we definitely want to continue. And we call them our creative learning classes because previously they called them special needs classes. And I don't know how I felt about that. So I said creative learning is something that we all do and something we can share. So we can definitely, fix the verbiage a little bit. Another thing that we came in and thought about was the language the volunteers and the mosques use to talk to our children about. So sometimes we have a word in Urdu that means bichara. Bichara means, and Nadim's laughing because he knows, bichara means someone who might be like you feel sorry for, or someone who you feel bad for, someone who you feel like is victimized in some way? And Nadeem, correct me if I'm wrong in translating too.
Someone that you have a lot of sympathy for, or like someone who's been deprived of something, someone who's unfortunate, perhaps.
Yes, exactly. And that takes the equity out of the relationships, and that makes you in a position of power and hierarchy. And so we had to then go to all these volunteers within these classrooms and say, that's not how we speak to everybody else, right? Like, no one is more vulnerable than the other. We're all vulnerable in our own states of physical and mental and emotional beings. And so we realized that our community has a way of thinking about individuals with disabilities. And while we are working with the individuals themselves, we had to work on reframing the mindsets of the community, because that's how they've kind of seen these individuals. And that's the kind of spaces where they must have interacted with individuals or, thought about that. And these are also generational sometimes too, where you hear your parents talk about it at home, and then and that's not to say that they, meant it in that way, but sometimes terminology matters. And so we came in and we were like, we can't really say these things, and we can't call our kid special needs child, because they are Erica first, and then they are whomever they want to be and however they want to express themselves. And so we also realized that our community needed a lot of, guidance in terms of understanding what therapy looks like, because our families didn't have access, or they may have had access to them, but they didn't know how to go about it. So we also supported our families with understanding their insurance policies on Medicaid. So it became a space of, yes, we're learning, yes, we're having fun, we're developing a community, but we're also sharing resources. Now, this is all within like our internal group. Our leadership is still not entirely on board with it, because they have a million other things going on. But I think we would love to maybe develop some resources to help the leadership get on board, because I think until a parent sees a leader of a mosque being accepting and truly welcoming in a space that they find to be the most belonging, a sense of belonging to them, it's really hard to work from the way down. But we really want, people at the top-notch levels to say, hey, welcome, come on board, and this is how we're going to make this space amazing for all of us. I'm not going to change anything, but I'm going to make it better, because that's what we all deserve. So that's just a little synopsis of what we're going through and some of the ways in which we hope to work with our families.
Thank you so much. My brain is exploding here with everything. So I want to share a story with you that kind of points out the irony, but also points out really a common theme among congregations about inclusion. And as you know, or maybe don't know, February is Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. And it's grown exponentially over the last 12 years. I think it started with 6 communities, and now it's like a global thing. And which is great. The idea behind JDAME was to raise awareness, but with the expectation that February is 1 month out of 12, and it's really what happens the other 11 months that makes a difference, that's what it's all about. So during JDAME one year, I visited a congregation. I'm not even going to say where it is, but it was a big congregation, and they were having an inclusion Sabbath, an inclusion Shabbat. Like, don't you think all Sabbaths or all services should be inclusion services, if you will? Of course, but this congregation was having this inclusion service, and this was the inclusion. This was what they meant. Okay. The chair of the committee spoke. I'll get to that in a second. And they invited guests, Jewish people who lived in this huge, enormous residential treatment center that they called a school. And they invited people to come to the service. So I doubt if they invited them individually. I'm sure they just said, oh, we're having a service. Do you have any Jewish people? Bring them on, bring them in. I got there a little bit late to the service, and it was packed. The sanctuary was packed. So my host and I sat towards the back, and happened to be that all the people who were attending from the school were also sitting in the back. So we were sitting right with everybody who was there. So the inclusion chair gets up and gives a speech about how great they're doing. Oh, we're doing so well. We have an inclusion committee. Would everybody on the committee stand up? And probably 30 people stood up. Now, you know committee work, right? There's like, you may have 30 people on a committee, but maybe 5 do the work. So they're all standing up and they're all getting kudos. It's great, wonderful. And they're talking about how they put in a ramp and an automatic door opener and large print prayer books and so on and so forth. And they mark all their food after, during the, we call it an oneg on Friday nights, oneg Shabbat. They mark all the food with gluten-free, nut-free, and everything. Okay, all good things to do, right? Well, what's happening in my little corner of the sanctuary are a lot of noise and a lot of fidgeting, to the point where people were turning around and giving them the stink eye. They were like, can't you be quiet? If you're a parent of a child, you've heard that, you've seen that directed towards yourself, right? Or we've seen it in our sanctuaries at times. And fidget, noise. This chair is droning on for 20, 25 minutes. And I'm thinking, ugh, could you just shoot us now? Get us out of this misery. Finally, the person stopped speaking. And the cantor stood up on the altar and started singing beautiful. I think it was a psalm. It was beautiful. And all of a sudden it got very quiet where I was sitting. And I turned and looked at the woman who was sitting like a chair away from me. She was one of those visitors. And we took each other's hands and we looked at each other. And I just, even telling this, I get chills, I get goosebumps. We looked at each other, just seeing that spark of the divine in each other's eyes. And we just stayed in that place till things ended. And to me, that was what meant the most about an inclusion service, was just being present with another person. So all was said and done, and they left, largely ignored. And while my heart was breaking, I was thinking, it's one thing, if a congregation says, oh, we have an inclusion committee, or we're inclusive. What does that mean? It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that zing, if it doesn't have an ingrained purpose, something that is embedded into the DNA of the congregation, that all people have a right to be there. Panim el panim, face to face. Thank you, Rebecca. And so I think that is the biggest challenge facing our congregations, our faith communities, is getting past that idea that inclusion is a one-note kind of thing. Because as those of us with lived experiences know, we don't want one-offs. We want to belong. We want to be part of the congregation. We want to be part of our chosen faith communities. We don't want to be dropped off in a van and seated, in a sanctuary, in the back of the sanctuary, or with a group of other people who have disabilities. We want to be part because we are part. And so that's, I think the challenge is for big institutions, small institutions, to see the dignity, the respect that is owed, the value of every single person. And that, That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I'm going to turn this over to one of my mentors and one of the people I have known the longest in this field, my dear, wonderful friend, Bill Gaventa.
What a great discussion and great presentations. That's the one thing I like about a Zoom panel or webinar, because you go to a workshop at a conference and you can't sit there and have a side discussion without being impolite to the speakers. It's I've always said sometimes to people, and when I'm talking to a group, I say, if you've got a question, ask it. Don't hold it back. I'm used to, from my years of working as a chaplain with adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, people had a question or a response, they'd tell it right then. They wouldn't hide it. So, don't use good, normal Christian behavior to look like you're paying attention when you're not. It's it's great to have people talking and sharing with each other. So there are a bunch of questions that were in this and that came along, and some of them have been answered. I want to kind of go backwards through that. One of them that came up in several talks was the importance of getting leadership on board, like the head imam, the rabbis, the clergy. What have been some of your best strategies for doing that to the panelists? What's your best recommendation? Come with a parent or a couple of people with disabilities and say, come just listen to our stories and let's have a talk about their hopes for greater participation or whatever. What do you recommend? Panelists first, and then
should I say, or, can I speak?
Yeah, Nadeem, go ahead. Yeah.
So, I think I cannot speak for all the different congregations. I can only speak for my congregation. I think that there's not a lack of understanding or awareness. I think that every single imam across the nation understands. And now that majority of the imams are born and raised here in this country, they understand the dynamics, they understand the challenges of society. I think that, as I said earlier, majority of the mosques across the nation are still operated by the immigrant community. So what happens is that they understand that things have to be done. There has to be a certain level of awareness, but because the leadership of the mosque in terms of the management, the board of trustees or directors and so forth, because they don't feel like it is as important for that community. So therefore they may not place immense amount of attention to this topic and this subject matter, because at the end of the day, they got to get paid and they're the ones who are paying the religious leaders. So I don't think that it's not difficult to get the imams, to be honest, on board, but many times it becomes difficult for them to sell it to their employers that this is what we need to focus on in our congregation and in our center. And a lot of times they feel like that because we may not have, they as Sehrish had mentioned earlier, that many times they are simply under this impression that there are not people in our community with disabilities, but what they don't realize is there are people, but they have just simply stopped coming to the mosque because they don't feel that environment or that space as inclusive. So that's the disconnect where I feel right now. And hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, question. When you said the imams have to sell it to their employers, is there a governing board of a mosque or center like that?
Yes, because there's a certain board of each mosque, and they're the ones who run the day-to-day affairs of the mosque, the finances of the mosque, and so forth. And then you have the imams or religious leaders that they're the ones who conduct the prayers, give provide religious talks, pastoral counseling, but they're not the ones who are taking care of the day-to-day affairs. It's different. I have some friends who are pastors and rabbis, they tell me, when they explain to me the dynamics and the setup and the operation of a church or a synagogue is very different than how mosques are run today. So that's where the disconnect is.
Helpful. Okay. Other comments or questions?
While we're on the topic of just talking about Muslims, I would just like to say that what we did was we created like a one-pager, because they told us that leadership only has time to look at a 30-second one-pager. So we said, okay, so we made like a one-pager, and in it on the top, we put like different common disabilities like autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, all of these things or vision and things like that. So we put disabilities at the top, and then at the bottom, we said, if a child comes to you and says, hi, this is what you can do. If a parent comes to you and says this is what you can do. And so we asked them to share it with other leaders of the mosque as well. And that way, because the feedback we kept getting is, sure, we know individuals are in the mosque, we don't know what to do. What's the next step? And so we just gave them like a quick how-to guide about how to engage in conversations. And one of the things we also recommended is how to include individuals within mosque leadership as well as within larger volunteer positions. Because what they do is usually we have those very everyday tasks that volunteers do, and then there's decision-making tasks that volunteers do. And we said our students need to be towards the top tier making decisions as well, because they can. So that's one of the recommendations we gave them. And so that was just one way of informing.
Okay. Other comments or questions related to that?
I think that it's not always the clergy, it's the boards of trustees and, lay leaders who, come from outside the world of nonprofit, outside the world of, the functioning of a congregation and what people are expecting. One of the boons to all of this is the diversity, equity, and inclusion focus now in not just corporate but nonprofit world, which has really opened up to include people who are marginalized groups of people. And that is a good way. I think sometimes you have to meet people where they're at, is to sit down with boards and talk about DE&I and how it's manifest and how it would be manifest in in their congregation. One of the other things is that they oftentimes, the resistance is simply, we don't have the money for that. It's not in the budget. And it is so important to really frame this for them and make it even personal. That inclusion that is about belonging. You're belonging here. You're a leader here. You are lending your expertise. There's a reason for you doing that, and you have access to be able to be that person. Don't you think people who aren't you, who aren't like you, might want those same opportunities? And it just has to kind of be in their faces.
Okay.
I think for me, is sometimes some clergy didn't have formation, so they don't know what they don't know, and we had to help them, and they have a lot of work to do. And I always say to the volunteers in this ministry, just say, I just want to work with this family. Just give me a chance to do it. And just give it the solution. I always do that. I have all the permissions with my former boss, my former pastor, because I say, we have this situation and we can fix this way. And he said, no more things for you. But other thing I saw is the resistance. We don't have persons with disabilities here. So, and I see this as a national level in all the dioceses, in all the parishes. And they send the child from this parish to go across the town, because that's the parish that offer these services. And for me, this is my parish. And
Exactly.
the parish pastor has the limit. This is my parish. And the pastor has the obligation to provide the spiritual formation for that person, for the family. And I think we have to speak up and say, how we can help, how I can be part of this community. I know I belong to here. I know I'm a children of God. How we can be together. And we don't have to be scared or have fear to speak up. And I think we have to empower not just the parents, but also the lay leaders. I noticed that I was presenting one time in a conference. I have just 40 people, but my friend in evangelization has 200. So we had to educate, and I always believe the leaders, you had to form in this ability, in this ministry, to the catechist volunteers. And I think we as leaders, we had to provide those formations in training. It's something that you have to do it, because you will have a child with disability, a youth with disability in your ministry, and how you want to help them. So I think we still, no, we don't have, and we have to, yes, you will have in your ministry. And also we have this resource from our office, and it's free. And, it's still people, it's a beautiful document, and it's from the Conference of Bishops, and about the dignity of the person, and how you can give the sacrament to a person who has severe disability, and that person don't speak up, with a reverence and with showing the respect to the communion, can receive the sacrament. But if you don't have this guidelines that is free, that we offer for free, you don't have this tool. And I think we still had to educate at our community and provide those resources and information. And I hope in one time I can have 200 people like my friend, right? But I think it's formation and awareness.
That's really ironic, because if you think about it, evangelism is about trying to get people who are not in the church to come, and yet and that's exactly what you're talking about, is offering a home to people who usually don't come. You could say to the person leading the evangelism workshop, for 10 minutes, let's get together, and have everybody talk, because that's what this is about as well.
That is my plan, Bill. That is my plan, to switch. What I can switch for? Yeah, I don't need 10, just 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah, exactly. Okay. What are the other, and I want to, Esther, to come back to you for another question. Do you see parishes coping with people with dementia? That's everybody's fear these days in terms of growing old. Is that helping at all in terms of sensitivity in the parish to people with disabilities on a wider perspective, or with other intellectual disabilities?
Yeah, we see the increasing of mental illness and dementia. My mom had dementia, and we didn't saw services in the church helping them in the church. And I think this is an area that we have to work. The same way you see the children or the youth gathering in the parish, but the same way we have to gather in, with a persons who have, dementia, because my mom received the communion until the end of her life. She died in 2017, and she was receiving the communion. She remembered her prayers. And so I think we had to find ways to provide those moments of communion in the parish. During the pandemic, we saw many people with depression, many people isolated. And I know many people who are deaf, they feel that, because they didn't have the resources and the time to be together. I miss that part too. So we, during the pandemic, we have a lot of resources on mental illness, suicide, and you can say ncpd.org, and you can find resources, webinars to help you and help your ministry, because we saw that big need. We also want to have a conference on mental illness next February, because we see the need to have a specific conference on that.
Well, I guess my question could also go the other way, to say, as parishes have become, or congregations have become more welcoming of children with intellectual disabilities, and kind of creating creatively learning classes, Sehrish, that's a wonderful name. You may have just solved a question that's up in a lot of Christian circles about getting past special needs classes, as a title. But But, it goes the other way, because a lot of what we know about ministries of people with dementia is that the response to things like core prayers and rituals and music, things that are embedded in people's bodies. It's not a mind thing in terms of what you think and know about your faith. It's about, how you live it out, and part of who you are in that. So it may go church says we don't know what to do with dementia. We say, well, we're doing well here with these kids. Let's do some of the same things there. Participating in communion is a key part of that. Yeah. Thanks. Other questions? The people who are not talking have a question.
So I just have one last thing to say. Actually, I have to go at 1:30. But one thing that what we're trying to do in order to bring on some more clergy is that right now in Plano, Texas, a friend of mine actually has found a small location, like a third space, where a lot of the younger generation, the youth of the community, they come, and it's a more friendly kind of, a more laid back kind of like space for them. There's pool tables, and there's an Xbox for them and PlayStation for them there, and they feel really comfortable there. And actually that is where it's not necessarily a mosque as much as it's more of a third space, although they are going to be conducting prayers there. But that is now where we are going to be conducting majority of our programs there. So now we don't have to necessarily abide by all the different bylaws and the rules necessarily that the mosque has implemented in place, but it's more of a more relaxed environment. And we're going to have more programs there. And in order to draw in the clergy and to get their support, we're actually going to have them come over there and, conduct some talks to the parents over there, casual talks with fathers, with mothers and so forth. So that's what we're trying to do also, in order to, because I understand that with every single center, they want to stick with certain laws and certain rules in place. But then when you have a third space where it's very relaxed, and at the same time there's no one overlooking and making sure that this is in place and that is in place, and it's more of a neutral environment, then that is where parents might feel comfortable in coming, that I can come there and my kids can be who they are. There's no restrictions. There's nothing for me to worry about. So that's what's happening right now also in Dallas. There's a lot of third spaces that are popping up for this reason too. And having said that, I have to get going, but thank you so much. But before I leave, I just want to congratulate also once again Shelly and Sehrish for their outstanding work and for their awards, and it was great to see all of you. My information was shared earlier, my email address, and once again, Esther, I would like to also get in touch with you too. I know you're in Dallas, so thank you so much.
Oh, Esther's in Dallas. You're not in Washington? Terrific. Well, both of you need to connect with the Dallas Faith Inclusion Network. Already are? Okay, good. Good.
Yes.
We're trying to start one in Texas, so it's for Texas.
Yeah, I love to. We love to.
Yeah, okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Other questions from people or comments? Sarah, you're the timekeeper here. So Rabbi Dubois.
Dubois.
Okay.
Like in bow tie.
Okay, good.
I don't remember the question you were asking, but I was just thinking about, some of the best practices, or I'm reflecting in the Jewish sleepaway camps. There have been a number of programs, I'm sure Shelly knows, like the Tikva Camp Ramah program, and they have created, I believe, a phenomenal camp program for children and young adults. And this started, I think, about 20 years ago. But is it a bit more? Okay. But anyway, my point is that, we're talking about the challenges of clergy in synagogue or even the parish, perhaps, because they are undaunted with other priorities.
Right.
But there has been a much more of an effort and push at the camps. However, there was an incident this year that I had there was a young teenager who's on the spectrum and wanted to go to this particular Jewish camp, and they said yeah, and then they said no because it was just like, and of course I was not happy. But as a result, they found out another camp in the Chicago area. But the point is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but sometimes the place to do it within the Jewish community, camp seems to be one of the successful components of embracing the concept of inclusion in the Jewish community. And yes, thank you, Rebecca. Yes, they're supported, but I'll tell you one of my peeves, if that's the right word, they're not very clear. They don't say it on their websites. You have to click, and see if you can find it. It's not on the front. The fact, okay, they're supported by this particular foundation. And then me being who I am, I'm becoming more outspoken now than I have before. I think, okay, so you got a grant to support the children. Well, tell me about it. Who's going to be on the staff? What are you doing? And the camp director, again, not to put them in a bad light, I'm not going to say the name of the camp, just like Shelly is. We're trying to be very respectful. I mean, their intentions are right, but there's much work to do. So.
Well, and the thing that I know about camps and also about youth programs that get into, especially middle school and high school, is that if you get then other kids at that point being peer buddies and things like that with kids with disabilities, those become lifelong and often vocation shaping experiences with people, and talking about living out our faith at a time when so much of what's happening during teenage years is people trying to separate themselves into who's cool and who's not, and who belongs and who doesn't, and who's in and who's out. And to use the Christian term, the whole witness there of trying to be inclusive is just so powerful. Yeah, Rabbi.
I just want to say one reason why I'm very passionate about camp, because I'm super proud of my daughter who got her master's in Jewish education at the Hebrew Union College school that we went to. But her passion is special needs. So she is known as the NEFIT coordinator. She's the camper care coordinator at Camp Newman, which is in Santa Rosa, part of the UIJ. And she also went, with the Foundation for Jewish Camp, they did a cornerstone program. So they've done a lot, but my daughter, we recognize the fact that there is much more that needs to be done. That's all.
Corey, translate panim a panim.
Face to face.
It means face to face.
Face to face.
It's taken from the Torah. It talked about from the 5 books of Moses when Moses was called upon God, the burning bush, and they have the first encounter, and it said panim al panim. So that's the
face to face. Pan, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
David.
Yeah, just a question for the panel. One of the things that I guess has been a point of exploration for me. It seems that when we begin to talk about inclusion, belonging of people with disabilities in congregational life, at least it's true with me, it has been over the years, that I tend to talk about people with disabilities as almost this homogenous group, that they go as one group together. I regard them as one group together, and then I say, why can't we talk about inclusion? And in the last couple of years, I've kind of been re-steering myself toward something that ends up, I think, talking more about asset-based kind of things. For example, we have at my own parish, as an example, we have an education committee. And I say, well, wouldn't that education committee, in its broadest sense, be better at what they do if they had some first person expertise, which they don't now have, from someone with a developmental disability? We recently went through a remodeling program, and one of the people on the planning committee used a wheelchair. And I can tell you for a fact, that committee made different decisions, and the building ended up looking different just because of that presence. And I wonder if there's, I guess, ground to be plowed on the notion of this sort of asset-based, one at a time kind of things. I mean, we preach a good gospel from a Christian perspective, I will use that analogy, about everybody has something to bring to the table. But I think sometimes we don't live that out one person at a time, maybe as we should. And I just wonder if there's reflection or other experiences that that people would share in our learned panel here.
I can comment on that. When I first started my program here in Minneapolis 21 years ago, I sat at a meeting of the planners, everybody who had coordinated, and they were professionals from the community and educators and parents, all planning this inclusion program for people with disabilities. And I looked around the room at my very first meeting, and I didn't see anybody with a disability. Now, granted, I grew up in this community, so I might have known if somebody had a disability. I wasn't sure. And I was the only person in the room who, I do have diagnoses that qualify me as having a disability. I don't see it as a disability, but I realized, this is good intentions, right? But good intentions not followed by actions are worthless. They are without value. And I think the cardinal rule is
Yeah, your voice disappeared, Shelly.
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. The cardinal rule is nothing about us without us. You don't plan a program. You don't plan a whole initiative. You don't do things for people with disabilities, because people are the subject matter experts of their own lives. And I think that's should be at the top of the list of any well-meaning institution. Unless you have some people with lived experiences, don't, take a step back and make sure that people are involved. And P.S., you don't have to be the hero. P.S., you don't have to have all the answers. This is a communal effort, person by person.
Rabbi.
I often say, I know that when I also been blessed to travel throughout the country, like what Shelly did, people have a desire to create an inclusion committee and so forth. And I often remind people, who are you? Who are your people? Because they feel like they just want to, do everything. And we can't do everything. We can only do who's there. So there's no one approach or solution, and it can change every couple of years. So again, just like with Shelly said, you have to know your people, person to person, for them to be empowered. One of the things that the clergy that I find very important. There's a beautiful story on one Yom Kippur, I think it was about 20 years ago. I knew that there was a family in our community that had a child with very severe special needs, however you want to describe it. I may not be using the right term, so I apologize in advance. Anyhow, but this was a family who was very committed, involved in the Jewish community, and once their child was born, they completely abandoned their faith because they were ashamed. You've heard of it. But I spoke about the need to recognize that there are people in our community that need to be welcomed. So I was very passionate. I usually am a very passionate speaker when I speak from the pulpit, but they were there because I asked them to come, and tears were falling down the mom's face. But it's just that one-on-one connection that's so important. And so anyway, so I guess what I'm saying is, you are all holy people. Whatever you are doing, incredible work. And I appreciate it.
Dave, your comment reminds me of about 10 years ago, I was helping a Presbyterian church in South Jersey do sorry, let me turn off my prepare for a workshop on inclusive ministries. And the adult do this was came to the church every week and folded the bulletins before the service for Sunday. And I just asked a simple question. I said, does she get to hand them out? And no, she didn't get to hand. Nobody had ever thought about asking her to stand with another usher and hand them out if she's the one who folded them before the week. And it goes back, Sehrish, to your comment about all those other kind of volunteer jobs that get done. People need to see people with any kind of disability, or not with any kind of disability, with any kind of ability, using that ability. Put it that way.
Have you guys seen the visual that's been going around in the media about a Muslim woman with Down syndrome who just recited the Quran? I'm not sure if you guys have seen that, but it's kind of being advertised everywhere. And it just makes me think about, what about the individuals who may not be reading? What about the individuals who may be using like a Braille Quran? Or, it just seems that we have to say individual with Down syndrome read the Quran, and we have to show a picture. It just still makes me feel like it's not inclusive. It's still exclusive to share these kinds of media representations of what a Muslim could, and it just makes, and everybody's like, oh wow, she has Down syndrome and she's reading the Quran. And it just makes me feel like, what about others who are there every day in the mosque 24 hours a day serving, and no one looks at them because they haven't been able to read or accomplish this terrific job of completing a holy text. And so I think it's also in the way we think about how we want to spotlight our students or family members with disabilities within our spaces, and also what we are doing to encourage them further. So what are we doing after she reads the Quran? Is she going to be part of the clergy? Is she going to go further? Where now? We've advertised it and we said she's great, and now everybody's having her as a speaker. A lot of Muslim disability groups are having her as a speaker, read the Quran, talk to the students. But when she goes away, who takes care of her, and what happens? And this bothers me, because it feels like we're enlightening one aspect and also not talking about how important it is to support her throughout her whole journey, not until she's done reading a text.
That's what I think our role as a ministry leader is to empower the person with disability and also make them visible, not just in the one mass every year, but in the regular mass every Sunday, every service. And I have one experience with one of my catechists. I encouraged them, and I'm still in contact with them. They were my catechists 6 years ago, but I still have the relationship with them. And I say, why you don't ask the family or the children with, I think they had two with Down syndrome, bring the gifts in mass. And the following week, she called me and she was so sad and she was crying because she said the people were looking to this kid because they were different. And said, you know what? And she wanted to quit. And I said, no, you need to go back and you need to continue doing that, because we have to let the people know that the church belongs to all. And we have the same dignity. But they need to see us more. They need to see that we're more present, more visible. And this is the part of catechists, as volunteers, as ministry leaders. We have to show that we are present and we are the church. This belongs to all of us. But I think welcome radical. We have to practice that radical welcoming. We need to do as a Catholics.
I think it was at the Institute a couple of years ago where somebody said, what we try to do is to get the most popular kid in our Sunday school class to make friends with a kid with a disability. Then all of a sudden it becomes cool to you're part of the in group and you've gotten that that kind of thing. We've got time for some closing comments from the panelists. So at least on my screen, I've got 4 of them nicely lined up there. I wonder if you've got any closing comments on this discussion, which I think has just been terrific and energetic. So we'll go, let's see, I'll go from my left. Rabbi Rebecca.
There's no such thing as a personal question. When people say, I have a personal question, they want to ask me about, there's no such thing as a personal question.
Okay.
Please ask. I'm sorry, I'm just saying to help people, please, being put on the spotlight. I wanted to use the word, but inspirational point. It's probably not. It's very, anyhow, so let me end on a positive note. Okay, I believe in all of you. I know that what you're doing is holy work. And I am so uplifted to know that there are people out there that truly believe in B'Tselem Elohim, that we are all created in the image of God or Allah, and however you believe. And that there is hope, and that our world will be a better place because of all of you. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you for being here. I'm going to go to Sehrish. I'm going to end with you, Shelly, because you're part of our crew, our regular crew. Sehrish?
Thank you for, providing such a beautiful and open space for us to talk about where we come from and what do our lives look like beyond the Zoom screen. So thank you. It was wonderful to hear from everyone and talk about their experiences and how we would, come together to kind of work with our families in our own individual contexts. And I realize we have so much more in common than I had ever thought. And that's beautiful because I've never gotten to see that aspect. I've always lived in my Muslim bubble, but it's so nice to see everybody's going through the same stuff, guys.
Exactly. Esther.
Just to continue to open those doors and bring the opportunities to grow in faith, to pray in different ways, and help them to be participating as a pastoral council, person with disabilities, be present. I know as a ministry leaders, we can do that. And sometimes we don't do it because it's extra work, but I think it's our mission of Christ in doing that. And I just, open the doors, and wherever I go, I always ask, why is not the Black community here? Why is not the deaf community here? So wherever we go, just ask who is not here, because if we're not complete, we're not represent the body of Christ. It's just that.
Yeah, we also, that's exactly right. Who's not here? Okay, Shelly, our awardee.
And thank you so much again. This is like a highlight of my career, of my life too. I have other highlights, just saying, but a shameless plug for the network to be part of the Religion and Spirituality Network, because so much good is coming together, not coming out of it, coming together because of it. And I, for one, want to see this conversation, this just learning from each other continue. We are more effective, more robust when there's more of us. And to that, I also want to add, this is a celebration. Today is a celebration. It's a celebration of work that we've all done and that we continue to do, to new voices, to voices that are maybe older and learning still. And it's a celebration. And so we stop at the celebrations because we need them. And we take a look back and we stop where we are and we take a look where we are. And then we put one foot in front of the other and we keep moving. We keep going because until we can reach a point where there's no such thing as an inclusion committee because everybody is included, because everybody belongs, we got work to do. So thank you. And thank you, Bill, for facilitating this wonderful.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. My pleasure. Sarah, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you. That was wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed hearing all of your stories and perspectives. And like Sehrish was saying, I loved hearing how, yeah, we have some differences here and here, and that's important, and we should celebrate that, but also just how much we have in common in the wonderful things we're going through, the frustrations we're going through, and how I can see that we can come together, you know, just as an interfaith group, as interfaith people coming together and really supporting each other in this. And so you've shown a lot about how we can do that. Thank you so much.